Hi, I'm JJ, otherwise known as the Practical Alchemist, with another extraordinary interview for you today. I really appreciate you watching these, and if you like them, you find them interesting or helpful in any way, please do comment, share, and subscribe to this channel for more. But here's the real intro. My guest today is Dr. Ski Chilton. Now, he is probably the most qualified person, the highest achiever I have ever met. He's the author of 6 books, the most recent bestseller being a blend of science and mindfulness and spirituality. It's called There's Another Way to Happiness, the 4-step CAST process that will transform your life. It's quite the promise, I think you'll agree. Ski is a real polymath. He's achieved so much in his life, and so much so that it will take me quite a while to do him justice in this intro. So please stay with me because I'm going to try. As well as being an author, Ski is a biochemist. He's a professor and director of the Center for Precision Nutrition and Wellness at the University of Arizona. He's an innovator and entrepreneur who has published more than 160 scientific publications and registered 15 patents. He's founded 4 companies as well as a non-profit, and he's won numerous awards. And he was recently inducted into the National Academy of Inventors in the USA, and his work is recognized around the world for being at the forefront of nutrition and wellness, and both by academia and industry. Then there's his philanthropic work, which spans a couple of decades. Back to the books, though, right now, which include The Rewired Brain and Inflammation Nation, which I think was his first book. And that's where we started this conversation that I originally recorded for my show Alchemy 101 on UK Health Radio. And I'll leave the link to that in the description below, as well as a link to the show that Ski recorded with me and my late co-presenter, Dr. Mark Goulston, which is one that's not to be missed. But let's get back to Dr. Ski Chilton and hear his wisdom. Inflammation. It really is the root of a whole host of health problems, isn't it?
It really, really is. I mean, it really is the underlying molecular mechanism behind almost every major disease we face, from arthritis to asthma to cardiovascular disease to cardiometabolic disease to depression to Alzheimer's disease. There is almost no disease that is not driven by inflammation, and no disease in which inflammation is not the primary driver.
Yeah, and many causes of inflammation. We talk about anti-inflammatories all the time. Is that all that we can do to bring down inflammation? There's a whole load of other stuff, isn't there? Not just physical either.
Well, I published these 6 books, as you know, and it's kind of interesting the order in which they've been published.
Yeah.
I started out with Inflammation Nation, which was Simon & Schuster's lead health book in 2006. And again, that predicted the inflammatory epidemic well before inflammation was a kind
A
of
thing.
a thing. And then went through several books, the Gene Smart Diet, Made to Crave Action Plan. Again, several diet books, but then really began to understand that the approach to inflammation, the approach to human health, at least in Western societies, was not only physical, but it was deeply, deeply emotional as well.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things, one of the initial things that made me understand that is, after publishing these early books, I would give conferences, or there were people who would come in my office, and there would typically a woman who would come in my office, and she may be, you know, incredibly obese, maybe over 300 pounds. And there was one statement that I could say to her that was the most impactful, and it had nothing to do with advice, dietary advice. But the one statement, and I remember the first time I said it, and I said, "This is not your fault." And she just started crying. And she wept for an hour. I didn't think I would get her out of my office for the
Wow.
week. And that replicated itself over and over and over again. And so what I began to understand was there was this deep, deep shame, this deep, deep guilt, this deep, deep unhappiness that was at the center of these inflammatory physical maladies that I was seeing in front of me. And I think it's somewhat ironic that I flipped in my last two books to the rewired brain, which is really how we screw up our lives, including our health, with our unconscious minds. And then finally, there is another way to happiness, because I've realized that happiness is the dog wagging the health tail.
Mm.
It's not the other way around. It's not health wagging the happiness tail. If we're not happy, if we're feeling shame, it's not going to be possible to be healthy. And there's also reason that the stress response produces cortisol, adrenaline. Cortisol and adrenaline in turn, first of all, shuts off your immune system initially, and then chronically it shuts it on hugely. And the unhappiness in you at that point is driving inflammatory cytokines, and then in turn is driving every inflammatory disease. So the connection between our mental health and our physical health is so inherently linked that we cannot approach one without the other.
Yeah, it's I think it's fascinating. And as you were talking, I was thinking about how, you have all these statistics, all these studies about increased prevalence of ill health amongst poorer strata of society. And you think, well, yeah, no wonder really, because of the stress, because of the shame, because of the unhappiness. Yeah, I can absolutely see that on a huge scale. Yeah.
You know, another example, I had and I get these calls every once in a while, and I don't even know how to respond to them, but I got a call a few years back, and there was this man who said, "You saved my life." And I said, well, I thank you for saying that, but I really am a bit humbled by your statement. And I said, "Could you tell me could you tell me how I saved your life? And he said, I was a veteran, 80% disabled, 335 pounds, struggling with PTSD, addicted to alcohol and drugs, taking statin, sleep, antidepressant meds, and my wife had just kicked me out of the house. And he said, I initially read your book, The Rewired Brain. I then connected it to the reason why and why I was so unhealthy. I then went to Inflammation Nation so I could understand inflammation as the driver of the disease. Then I went to Made to Crave, the action plan, because I could get all the diet and I knew what to do when I went in the grocery store. And he said, right now I've lost 102 pounds. I'm in recovery for drugs and alcohol. I've shed multiple medications. I've just joined a master's degree program to become an addiction counselor, and my wife and I are happily reunited.
Wow. Wow. That's huge.
It's the deep connection. We can't address one without the other.
Yeah.
It has to be holistic. We can't. I can tell you all the steps, and I have the steps to optimize your physical health and reduce inflammation. That's my day job. That's what I've been doing for almost 40 years since my doctoral thesis. I can tell you exactly, but I will promise you, if you are not happy, if you are not finding satisfaction inside yourself, you will not be able to sustain. You will not be able to sustain. The people go in the gym, it's New Year's. People go in the gym right now. Guess what? 3 months later, they're all coming out.
Yeah.
It's just not sustainable without joy or happiness.
Yeah. And then I'm asking myself, or I'm just trying to put it into words in my own mind, what is happiness? Because we hear people talking about happiness, and we hear people talking about obviously the stress response, all of that, the impact on the body. I'm wondering, is there there probably isn't, I don't know, but is there a neat way to just say what happiness is? How would you describe it?
Let me first of all say what happiness is not.
Okay,
And
cool.
maybe that, and then we can hopefully get on the Venn diagram as to what happiness is. So in my most recent book, There Is Another Way to Happiness. Another way implies that there was a way, a tried and true way that in Western society, and I call it emotional inflammation, we have been given a set of rules. We've been given a set of rules. If you're successful, if you're educated, if you make more money than your neighbor, if you can outcompete your neighbor, if you can have, like me, a 52-page CV, I'm the most successful person I know. If you can have a 52-page CV, that is the formula to happiness.
And it didn't do you that much good, did it? I
Oh,
mean,
no. I'm taking anti-anxiety, antidepressants, high blood pressure
yeah,
medicine, and coming out of a second marriage, able to somehow save the world,
yeah,
but just hurting the people and them hurting me that I
yeah.
love the most. So that is not the formula for happiness.
Mm.
And we have to wake up We have to wake up to the fact that that's not the formula. Now, in terms of the formula, I'm going to get mechanistic again,
Okay.
and because I'm all about mechanisms. We are driven by these unconscious minds, and these unconscious minds take up 95% of our thoughts, and we don't even know they're doing it. And they're sitting there going by Western standards. I have to plan for the future. I've got to control the future. I've got to focus on the past, because anything that happened to me in my past can happen again and will happen again. And I have to outcompete my neighbor, and I have to be better than them, because that brain was developed 60 million years ago, and the only thing that brain wanted you to do is get your precious genes to the next generation. It didn't give a flying whatever if you were happy. In fact, it preferred you not to be happy. So you have this unconscious mind in you that's driving 95% of your thoughts. It's much, much faster. You have a second. So there's two yous in you. You've got this conscious mind that's filling all of that. It knows all of that's down there. It feels it, and it's doing it, and it's acting, and it's reacting based on that. 2/3 of people in Western societies are miserable. This is why they're miserable. So when I say wake up, waking up for me is, in mindfulness, we gain the ability to monitor that unconscious mind. And we gain the ability not only to monitor it, but we gain the ability to say, not today, not now. We gain the ability to say, man, I keep having those same thoughts over and over. I wonder what childhood trauma that's coming from.
Yeah.
I wonder what threat that came from. So, what is happiness? Happiness is freedom. Happiness is freedom from the nightmare of the unconscious mind.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. I've never heard it described that way before, but yeah, I love that. Love it. Yeah, we're enslaved to that unconscious mind for most of our lives. Yeah.
We are, and physically, if we, like this gentleman or all of these women, we have been kicked out of the tribe. We're obese. We have been kicked out of the tribe. You know what the worst thing that could have happened to you on the African savannah where humans emerged 200,000 years ago? You know what the worst thing that could have happened to you? It would have been kicked out of the tribe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's the source of our loneliness. These people are lonely. These people have been kicked out of the tribe. Society has kicked these people out of the tribe because they don't look the way that Western societies say they should look. They are sloths. They're lazy. All of this shame of being kicked out of the tribe. We must address that. How can we get healthy in
Yeah.
the face of such shame?
Yes. So it it would require a massive turnaround in how we approach health and well-being. Um, we have such a dependence in I say traditional, I mean modern medicine. We have such a dependence on drugs. So coming from the outside in, saying, oh, you've got this, well, that'll help you. You know, you've got inflammation, I'll give you an anti-inflammatory. We've got to address the cause, haven't we?
We really do. You know, one of the things and my poor students, they you know, I have about 25 MDs, PhDs, MDs, PhDs that do research in my lab. And my question to them is always, what is the first principle here? And the first principle is something that has been made famous from a long time ago, but even in ancient Greek societies. But the first principle is the principle by which everything else results.
Yeah.
So if we can get to the first principle, I've been so fortunate, I have over 25 patents. If we can get to the first principle, we can create in a way that we can solve problems. If we can get to the first principle of health, we can solve a whole myriad of problems. But if we're looking at the spider web and we're just pricking parts of the spider web, expecting that the spider web is going to come down, it won't, because we're just pricking parts of the spider web.
And that's not to say, yes. And I'm just thinking about your average person who is suffering from a lot of inflammation in their body, which many of us are, partly down to diet, partly for, you know, for all these other reasons that we're talking about just now. So for that person who is unwell generally, what steps can they take? I know you talked about this gentleman who read your books and then, you know, taught himself what he should be looking for in the grocery store and, you know, how to be mindful, that sort of thing. What would you say would be the initial steps? And if we were to change the way that the medical fraternity worked, what would be the first thing that you would look to?
Well, first of all, I want the audience to understand I'm not poo-pooing modern medicine.
No.
And in fact, I've spent my life developing drugs. So that is my day job. I have a sister right now who had juvenile rheumatoid arthritis. I watched her have joints replaced. I watched her go to methotrexate, a cancer drug. I watched her go, and it broke my heart. And thank God for these biologics, like, again, Imbral and all of these biologics, because they were a new way to attack the underlying inflammation. And they saved her joints, they saved her. And so no one's poo-pooing this other side of the equation. But as this gentleman did, he wasn't poo-pooing any of that. He went back to Inflammation Nation. He went back to the Gene Smart diet. He went back to Made to Crave action plan. He went back to the fundamentals of health. But at the same time, he reduced the inflammation associated with his unhappiness dramatically. It's so much easier to fight an inflammatory disease if you don't have a fire hose of inflammation that you're throwing on to it based on your emotional health.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a holistic journey. That absolutely has to be.
Yes, no, and I absolutely hear what you're saying and agree with you that the sometimes a drug is exactly what you need, if nothing else, but to kickstart your recovery from something that you're suffering from, like inflammation. But often you find that the medical world is a little bit over dependent on drugs and completely ignore the subconscious effect on health. And it's a real shame. But thankfully, there are people like you who have discovered this and have written about it and are practicing it. And I know that you have had your health challenges, but I'm looking at you now and you look very well. And that you do practice what you preach. But I know that you do have your health challenges.
Yes, I've had two cancers. I live really, really hard. I've had 12 surgeries, most of them self-induced. The last one from riding a wild Arabian horse that I never should have gotten on. But again, I'm passionate.
Yeah.
I live life passionately. I live life hard. And sometimes that has hard results. It's not results I would ever, not do. Uh, I was told I wouldn't walk after that accident, completely broke my pelvis in half. Run with me up a mountain right now. I challenge,
Wow.
any 66-year-old. So, let's not get this. I think one of the things, it's easy also to poo-poo the medical establishment, but I think one of the things about my new book, There Is Another Way to Happiness, there's a 4-step process
Yeah.
in that book. So when physicians say, get your mental health in order, there's not a prescription.
Correct. Yeah.
And they need a prescription. And I think one of the things about my 6-year mindfulness journey, one of the best things about it was there's no one who could have poo-pooed mindfulness more than me 8 years ago. I was laughing it out of the park. Last year, there were 900 studies on mindfulness, 200 clinical trials. I'm not poo-pooing it anymore. Now, that being said, and again, I don't want to put anyone down, but I'm not on the hippy dippy side over here. And I'm not on the religious side over here. I was able to come up with a framework, a structural framework for mindfulness in 4 steps. These are prescriptive ways that we can march through the process. It's not enough for the physician to say, be happy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's, quite frankly, there are no books or very few books that they can say, go to that book and that book will tell you how to be happy. So we have this gulf that needs filling, desperately needs filling.
Yeah. And I think that's where your work is so powerful and your experience is so powerful, because you are right in the middle where the 2 sides or 3 sides or however many sides there are meet. And you aren't just saying, oh, we'll just do, it's, you just need to meditate, or you just need to do this, or it, but you do need to know what the next steps might be. And that's what you've done. That's what you've written about. And I think that's hugely important and hugely powerful. And I thank you for that. And I also thank you for talking to me today. And we're coming towards the end of our chat here today. I'd love you to come back and talk some more about health and well-being. I know that you are an absolute wellspring of information on all of this, and I'd love to hear a little bit more about your own path to well-being And as you know, as we've said, you have had your challenges, and yeah, but you certainly you know, you look very well now. I can see that, you know, you have an energy, and it's great to see. And, you know, long may it last. And we need to make the most of every day as well, don't we?
We do. We really do. I think we have a common friend who just passed away.
Yeah.
And we have to wake up. We have to wake up. We have to wake up. We have to wake up from the nightmares of our unconscious minds. We have to wake up. Life is short. Uh, we have to it, we have to embrace the beauty and the passion of what's around us. We have to wake up, and we have to find a way to do that, because life is very short, and we're in this life, and we don't know what comes after this one. No one's done it or done it to come back and tell us about it. But at least in life, this life, we must wake up and live passionately and vibrantly and love the world with all that we are, because time is short.
And that love that we generate, was there a Beatles song that you are something about you are the love that you make or something? I can't remember which one it is. Seems to be in the back of my brain somewhere, my memory somewhere. But yeah, yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much.
Well, JJ, it's always a pleasure, and thank you for having me on. You're so precious, and you give the
Oh,
best interviews. Thank
oh,
you.
that's so sweet. That's so kind. Thank you. That's great.